listening to Tech Reads, interviews with emerging technology thought leaders. Our sponsor is Softtech, the premier technology trade association that has been serving northern Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo County since 1997. Our mission is to create Softtech moments where people connect, explore ideas, and create new business opportunities. Learn more at softec.org.
Hello, everyone. This is Brian Schwartz from Tech Reads, the podcast supported by Softtech, which is a great association here on the Central Coast, which is there to connect great minds in technology and business. Bob DeMuccio has joined us from Alaska. He's actually the president of Softtech. And I've got a room full of guests here to join us and chime in on the conversation and listen to Rob. Rob was kind enough to send me a copy of his book, The Spring of Sight. Both myself, Bill, and Bob have been reading the book, so we're familiar with it a little bit more, but I know that this is such a fast changing world that Rob's got some updates for us, and we've all been indoctrinated in all of the craziness that's happening with AI, but I think computer vision is something that hasn't been getting a lot of talk, but it's a very important subset of AI, and Rob's going to enlighten us a little bit more, and this is being recorded live, but it will be published as a podcast in the near future. So Rob, why don't you just tell us really briefly about yourself and why you wrote the book?
Sure. I'd like to think I have a sort of interesting and diverse background, spanning from the film industry and now into the world of AI and programming, specifically computer vision. I spent more than a decade actually as a worker in film production, like on set, in editing booths in New York City, in the wee hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., ingesting footage for shows you might recognize, like Billions, Spike Lee shows, a feature called Triple Frontier, and then kind of got bored of some of the tedious elements of work in the night shifts in the bowels of Hollywood, and wanted to learn to code to automate some of the sort of repetitive, tedious tasks that are sort of to be found in those like Hollywood backrooms. And that's where my career has led me. I've been the data science lead at Butterworks, a startup that analyzes social video data for entertainment companies like Viacom, CBS, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, and yeah, I want to knock on wood, but because I might start a new job opportunity soon. But in the meantime, I'm still promoting my book, The Spring of Sight. Thank you for mentioning it and for digging into it. I'm excited to share with the world more about what the proliferation of mature computer vision means for us. And I'll go straight into the, oh, yes.
No, I was going to say, if you wanted to move over here, if you need to hear better, it might be. You're welcome to come sit over here if you want. All right, it's working. All right, sorry, we're just having some volume difficulties. All right. Yeah, Rob, no, our pleasure. And it's just all, you're in an important conversation as the world is changing very quickly and the issue of ethics comes up and responsibility and just are we able to keep up with the technology? I hope we got another person to add to the stream. Hello, Courtney.
Hey.
So Rob just introduced himself, but Rob, what motivated you to write the book, and what do you hope people kind of walk away with after reading it?
Sure. The short and long of it is this suite of technologies is here to stay, right? It's not going anywhere. It's built into our phones, our urban infrastructure, the concert venues we like to attend, whatnot. So, and it can be used against you or for you. It can help you classify whatever radiological images you might be generating when you visit the hospital, or it can be used to like arrest you under false pretenses by lazy law enforcement officials. So it's a double-edged sword, and I don't think enough people are just having healthy conversations about it, and those conversations can lead to good common sense regulation, which is, of course, a dialogue between, the people, the constituents of any territory and the people who make the rules.
Yes, and that's good. And I think bringing somebody who has a lot of experience in the technology field, a younger person, and sort of bridging some of the things that we don't understand as the older folks in the room is really important to have people like you sort of kind of reveal some of the pitfalls and things that we're not even aware of. And quite honestly, as my own parents, they're the targets for a lot of the scammers, and the fact that they just don't understand this world, and the scammers out there understand this and take advantage of people like that. So I think it's important for your generation to educate us and protect us from getting taken.
Right on. Yes. There's a chapter in my book called AI Snake Oil, and it's about how to protect yourself from the scams, the kind of like posers, if you will, because there is such a big wave of AI software companies, and so few of them actually use like machine learning or like neural networks in their software suite. A lot of people just export work to other humans in like India and say like, we use AI, but of course like another human brain is like the most powerful AI you can come across today. So you got to ask yourself whenever you're throwing money at a new AI tool, what kind of problems does this solve for me? Maybe you're like a recruiting manager at a technology company or a film company or any company. You're responsible for hiring folks. You might encounter a product that claims to be able to score candidates based on a 15 or 30-second video. Have your job applicants send in a short video, and we'll tell you how adventurous or empathetic or intelligent they are on a 0 to 5 scale. And it's like, how could you possibly do that? Like we can classify facial expressions, like this is a smile, like yes, great, and this is a frown. You're good at doing that. Computers can do that too now, but you can't have a 15 to 30-second conversation with me and know for a fact whether or not I'd make a good job candidate. So like that data isn't there in the interaction. So what I'm saying is, when you're evaluating an AI product, it might be snake oil if it can perform miracles like that. If you can't do it in 60 to 120 minutes, then a computer can't do it in 30 seconds.
Well, and do you think it's going to be used for discrimination, like unknowingly, but discriminating against people who might be qualified but not possess the attributes that the AI system is geared towards?
Certainly. A startup like that one isn't going through any kind of vetting process by, like a recognized entity or board of any kind. It's just like, hey, our product claims to be able to do this. Watch, you can feed it a video and look, it spits out numbers. But where's the proof that the numbers actually correspond to like that candidate's, adventurousness or empathy score? Like there's no ground truth for that. And it's probably just totally random. And it probably performs worse. Like it probably scores people of color just like worse because maybe they don't have as much training data on people of color in their data set. And that's a recurring theme in computer vision. It's like, it doesn't have a mind of its own. It's not going to like become sentient and like inhabit your brain and take over. But when people train a computer vision classifier to distinguish between, okay, cat, dog, horse, it's also going to learn that, so frequently the thing in the kitchen wearing a kitchen apron is a woman. So when you show it like a man in the kitchen wearing a cooking apron, it might still say woman. And that's like, now your computer vision classifier is sort of sexist. So you see that kind of thing a lot. There's bias in the training sets, certainly.
Yeah, because it's using a limited set of data. And like you said, there's a lot of minor differences and things it's not going to pick up on. So the false positives are going to be rampant.
Right.
So from a recruiting tool, I mean, it's clear that should be a red flag if companies are using that we need to ask those questions and understand what are the criteria they're using. What other like fears do you have as far as computer vision being dependent upon too much?
Yeah. Before we go into more fears, I want to just sprinkle in a little happy,
Okay,
stardust. And
good
I'd
idea.
say that, like in medicine, it might be irresponsible not to use computer vision in a lot of domains because it can outperform whole boards of doctors in certain classification tasks. Um, if we can save healthcare providers time in the clinic, that's huge because our healthcare system is just like sagging and broken already. Like our healthcare workers are overworked and underpaid, and anything we can do to sort of like optimize processes in that clinical setting are very welcome, right? So if we can feed whole slide radiological images to an algorithm and have it say to a certain degree of certainty, like, yeah, that is cancerous and that's benign, and that's cancerous and that's benign and that's benign and that's, then that saves a radiologist a lot of time having to like study stuff. But we know the best results come from a hybrid of like having the human and the algorithm, work in collaboration. Just speeding up experts with those automated processes is sort of the sweet spot. But I am afraid, for other applications, right? Like facial recognition is one area that's fraught with controversy, and for good reason. It's a touchy subject. We like to have privacy in the United States. We are, a private people sometimes at home, and we sacrifice some of that when we buy devices like Nest cameras. Nest cameras are cool because they give you a sense of control over your space. They're like, do-it-yourself surveillance systems for your garage, your front door, your digital doorbell, whatnot. But now we're starting to look at questions like, whose footage is that? When there's a crime across the street and your home camera picks up on that, do the police get to, submit a warrant and get access to your personal home video footage and go digging through it? And this is real. This is happening in the United States today. We have a case where someone got a warrant for some Nest footage and for the house across the street, and but they started going through all of the footage, including inside this person's house, like in their living room, in their kitchen, and it's like, no, the crime happened across the street. There's no reason you need to be. Why are you looking in my kitchen? Like that's preposterous. So there's this question of who owns and how do we anonymize and protect ourselves in a world where, yeah.
And isn't the UK under like super amount of surveillance already compared to like the US? Like there's cameras everywhere there, and pretty much everything is being recorded.
Yeah, yes. So London is the surveillance capital of the world, you could say. There are so many cameras in London. I forget the exact figure. I quoted it in my book, but it's in the tens of thousands of cameras. And it's like you can't reasonably expect to leave your home without being caught on one of these cameras. So there was a lot of talk about implementing retroactive facial recognition for solving like historical crimes with historical footage and running new face recognition algorithms on that. And that's just like back and forth in the legal domain every day. In the United States, we have the case of Clearview AI. So my sort of journalistic idol in this domain is Kashmir Hill. She writes for the New York Times, and she's on the beat of what's going on with Clearview, especially this company that was in stealth mode for a while, but they scraped data, they scraped images, meaning they kind of just downloaded without permission people's faces from the popular social media networks, the LinkedIn's, Facebooks, Instagrams, Snapchats of the world, etc. So they had billions of images. Yes, Courtney.
Just a quick question, because I got background noise. How do I mute my own audio so you guys can't hear my house?
I can do it. It's done, Courtney. Just raise your hand if you want to speak.
And cut me off if I'm just way off on a tangent. But
No, this is good. I heard about the Clearview, but I didn't know the details of it all.
They've got all our faces. They're trying to license their excellent AI face recognition tool to law enforcement departments, and they've succeeded in the past. They've won a lot of contracts with like local police departments who just kind of willy-nilly take footage from the local gas station, feed it into Clearview's technology, and it'll pop out an identity, someone's name and their address, or not their address, but like someone's name, so they can like do further investigative work. And this has been wildly contentious, right? It's like, first of all, with scraping, like the fact that your face print, your biometric data, this space between your eyes and nose and the shape of your mouth, this stuff is unique to you. It's like your DNA almost, but it's just out there on the internet, and they collected it all and they built this massive data set, and they're leveraging it now, and there's no regulation around that, at least in most places.
Well, and there are communities now. I know the one I grew up in, that when you drive into town, there's only maybe 8 ways to drive into the city. There's cameras, and it says your license plate has just been recorded. You can't do anything to stop them from doing it, but they know when you drive into their town and when you drive out. And they're able to keep tabs. And this happens to be a suburb of Oakland, California. So they know the moment somebody drives into that town, and if there's a crime committed, I think the people who live there feel more protected, but at the same time, you're sort of also being watched. They know when you leave town, they need to know when you come back. And I think, Rob, the concern is that information is also accessible to hackers. Like, we might trust the organization that's taking it, but do you trust them to hold it securely? And that part is kind of scary.
That's a great question. Yeah. And Apple has done a kind of a good job of like protecting their brand identity by posturing themselves as like, oh yeah, we keep your data safe. And they might try to leverage that when they release their own self-driving car. They're claiming like theirs is going to have the ability to recognize you as you walk up to the car and like unlock itself and adjust the seat and the mirrors to fit your biometric profile. But you're right. The flip side is now, your everyday movements are being tracked. And so you don't have that reasonable expectation of privacy. So maybe that affects your behavior as a citizen. Like you're more likely to be a tame, denizen and not like a revolutionary if you don't like the society you live in. You see this in Moscow, the Moscow Metro. I'll get to you, Bob. In the Moscow Metro, there's something called face pay. And you can register a photo of your face, link it to your bank account, and boom, instead of like swiping, your payment card, you just walk up and it sees you and it says, yep, that's Brian Schwartz. Let's charge his debit card, and boom, the turnstile's open and you can go. It's very convenient. And of course, the sacrifice is in your privacy, right? So when an anti-Kremlin rally was happening, this journalist went to board the metro, and I don't know that he had even registered on FacePay, but they had his picture from a social media website. And when he went to ride the metro, the police just like nabbed him before he could go cover this anti-Kremlin rally. He was just a journalist. He's trying to exercise free speech and criticize the society he's living in. And facial recognition hampered that in this case. So that's probably the most ethically fraught angle on computer vision, is like it takes away from our privacy. So we need to do a lot of building of common sense regulations like they're doing in Massachusetts to kind of make it best of both worlds, right? Like it's good to catch the bad guys when they are really bad guys, and when we can really catch them and not just other dark-skinned people who look like that, right? Like I laugh, but it's serious. Like we can't be just arresting random people because they look like other people. Like that's very lazy.
We all have a doppelganger out there.
Right. Yeah.
Bob, you got a question?
Well, I'm curious that, what you're talking about sounds an awful lot like the face recognition on my Apple phone. So if anyone has a database that is dangerous, it's Apple. But how is that any different than someone putting out a general description of someone and them arresting based on the general description? At least it's more accurate. I mean, I get the privacy thing, but quite frankly, I think we've lost our privacy to a large degree. You can't go from here to the store in Alaska without being on 50 cameras. So, I think the old adage of, you have no privacy, get over it, is kind of true. It's kind of a, chasing things after the fact. But, databases like Apple's, which are very highly refined, they take really quality picture and store it, and they have it. And so, how do we trust, how do we get to trust Apple? How do we know that they're operating in our best behalf?
Yeah, it's true that we've probably sacrificed a lot of our privacy in a lot of ways already just by participating in social media websites. It's like we've all sort of uploaded our fingerprints to the public internet, basically. And we can't really undo that. So that's unfortunate. But there are many of us, especially the new generation, who choose to remain, to hold on to their online identity. We want it to live in a world where it is possible to maintain that semblance of anonymity, if even for short periods of time, like going to the grocery store. As far as the iPhone, and you're right, isn't it cool that we can unlock our phones just by pointing it at our face? The key is that I think Apple, I could be wrong about this, but I believe Apple devices like the iPhone, they keep your face print data siloed to just that device. I don't know that they upload it to any centralized server. That's one way to keep that data safe, is just to never send it back to base, if you will, back to headquarters, is just to have it encrypted on your device. So it's protected by, your login on your phone. You do have to unlock the phone and in order to gain access to that data. And it's encrypted on the device.
It's secured by our trust in Apple doing that, because none of us really know that.
Yeah, there's what they say they do, and it's our sort of collective trust in Apple as a consumer society, right?
Not just Apple though. I mean, it's this clear data obviously scraped LinkedIn.
Right, and that violated LinkedIn's terms of service, right? And LinkedIn got very mad about it and tried to, sent them a number of stern letters, strongly worded letters, but that data has left LinkedIn, right? When you upload photos to LinkedIn, it's a public place, essentially. It is maybe what we thought of as a sort of gated community, but it's like they flew the drone through our gated community and took pictures of everyone, right? If you will. So yeah, that's a good point, that in order to keep our biometric data secure, you want to be able to spot people committing crimes on the street, but you don't want to encroach on people's privacy. So what you can do is anonymize these public data, video feeds on the fly. That face information is just blurred on the traffic cameras on the street. Okay, a traffic camera is on the street corner, it sees someone going by, it's blurring their face as they go, and only counting perhaps the number of pedestrians that go by or the number of cars that run the red light. We want these very narrow purpose tools, and we want them doing exactly what we want them to do and no more. New York City is the first city, I think, in the country to implement a law where businesses have to post if they're collecting your biometric data at the door. The Whole Foods, if they're going to scan your face when you walk in, there has to be a sign on the door that says hey, we're collecting your biometric data. Don't come in if you don't want your biometric data harvested, for whatever we want to do with it. And maybe they're trying to catch shoplifters, or maybe they're going to implement their new, perks program that way, right? Could be good or bad. But yeah, the question of how to stay anonymous on the street is, it should be opt-in, right? Not opt-out.
But Bill's got a question or comment.
Well, it certainly seems like the challenge of how to find the balance that you're talking about is of premier concern. Because, I mean, technology always rushes ahead of society's ability to adapt to it. And society is always, in general, is always playing catch up. I mean, right now we know there is a film out called Oppenheimer about the project that brought about the atomic bomb during World War II. And ever since that time, we as a world culture have been trying to make sure that we don't blow ourselves up, that we don't end civilization. So with what you were finding with your research and everything you've been delving into, are you seeing that I'll just use the phrase, the MIT level software geniuses that are helping to move AI and computer vision and everything forward in this manner, are they feeling that most of their time is being able to be devoted to moving the good aspects of computer vision and AI forward? Or are they finding that they are having to spend almost an equal amount of time to prevent the hacking of the system, to prevent the, let's say the misuse, the negative pull of human behavior from turning things into
Deep fakes.
very technologically advanced criminal behavior. What have you been feeling? Where is that balance right now? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I spoke with Dr. Ramin Hassani at MIT's Computer Science AI Lab, and he has been working on something he calls liquid neural nets, which more closely mimic kind of biological processes. And the idea is to make, highly performant, highly accurate, computer vision powered systems with kind of simpler parts in a sense. Like if we have the whole brain of the nematode mapped out, like all the interneuronal connections, we have a map of that. Can we build a computer system that's a lot like that and have it learn how to park a car? That's what he's up to. And he is, he's very concerned about how we're going to regulate this stuff. He thinks that even by advancing the research, he's making it easier to regulate, because neural nets are famous for being sort of inscrutable. They are black box systems. The kind of latest flavor, the most advanced version of image recognition systems we have today, they're neural networks. That's a type of machine learning algorithm. It's just that once you feed it data and train it and get it, making predictions, it's very hard to look under the hood and say, why did it decide that Brian is going to commit crime again and instead of being a good guy? So these systems, it's important that we're able to look under the hood and analyze them, right? Because when you get your credit score or whatever, you want to be able to say oh, here are the factors that impacted your credit score. You made your on-time payments. Your credit history is long and has been around for a while. It's not fair to just be you have a bad credit score because I don't know. That's what the machine learning algorithm said. So Dr. Hassani is interested in making these systems simpler so that we can dissect them and say the car made the wrong turn here because it was fed this very specific input. And we need to give it more examples like that, so that it doesn't do that as much. And the same is true with facial recognition, with self-driving technology, with radiological image classification. It's good to make it simpler. The more we advance scientifically, kind of the simpler it gets, actually, paradoxically. We're making these systems easier and easier to scrutinize, and therefore easier to analyze and to regulate.
Yes, Dina.
I was wondering if anybody or if there's any entity who is working on the environmental cost of storing all this data and
The computing power required.
Right.
Yeah, did you look into that? Because I have heard that and been fearful for that as well, that we're so concerned about saving the environment, yet all this technology comes at a cost to the environment.
I think that's true. I have to say, I did not give that much thought for my book. I am more focused on the societal ramifications than the environmental ones. But, I like to call myself an environmentalist. And so I will admit that I should have looked more into that. Because, yeah, this is expensive computational stuff, which is, causing carbon emissions somewhere.
I was always shocked when I heard about Bitcoin and how damaging to the environment something like Bitcoin could be.
That was shocking.
Yeah, I would like to do some more research on
Yeah.
the environmental impact of this stuff. I think, it's making its way into lower powered devices, like on your phone. Your phone is now a huge consumer of the world's energy, and it can do really powerful computer vision stuff. Like it can count the number of pieces of plywood in a stack of 200 pieces of plywood. It can recognize your face. It's not the biggest problem, but stuff like the whole world using Chat GPT via the Bing browser is probably like a bigger problem right now. I haven't profiled these things. I don't know exactly how they compare, but great question. I will say, like, there's a whole other book to be written on, or that has already been written on the environmental impact of running all these kind of computationally expensive operations.
Is it sustainable? Yes. Is it?
Mhm.
That's the question, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know. I'm comfortable saying that's not my expertise. And,
Understood.
you gotta
Thanks,
ask someone
Bob.
else for that one.
Good question. For another
Bob's got another question. Bob.
Well, I'm curious if Rob is getting the questions in the chat as
Oh.
well as people raising their hand, or if Brian's paying attention to the chat.
No, thank you. Thank you.
You might want to pick up some of the questions that are over there as well. But I'm curious,
Courtney.
in your medical section of the book, in whatever chapter it was, you make a comment of it giving back to the medical technicians time that they can then spend with patients. That seems naive to me. I think that the management of those medical practices are going to add more appointments to the doctors if they see that there's available time. And I think that the real debate really is how we balance the positives and the negatives here, because AI and vision, from my opinion, is simply a tool. And the question of whether it's a good tool or a bad tool depends on who holds the end of the hammer. And so, that's really what this boils down to. And, to give our facial recognition out there is not a problem if all the actors are good actors, but they're not. And not all of these, these companies, Chat GPT as an example, started their business off by scraping the internet, which is stealing copyright, which is exactly the way Google started their business. So that's not without precedence. But I'm curious.
You bring up a great point. Yeah, it's like, is it more like a hammer or is it more like a screwdriver? And how incumbent is it on the creator of the tool to design it in such a way that suggests positive use cases? Because even a terrible actor can take something that's more like a screwdriver and make it work like a gun, right? Like, so what looks like a hammer to you might look more like a screwdriver to me. This is also true. So companies like Adobe have to strike this balance. Companies like Adobe who make like the Photoshop and Adobe Premiere video editing software of the world, for a long time, they've had the capability to just give it a feature where you can synthesize voices, right? Like, wouldn't it be nice if I could just, fix this bad audio in my podcast by using AI to like fill it in? But then where do you draw the line? What if I can just synthesize whole new Obama speeches or, whole new, like, Joe Biden speeches, and then we're at deepfakes. And then Adobe is responsible for letting people make, these harmful disinformation pieces. So they have to decide subjectively, like, how much they're going to enable their users. And they purposely, I spoke to a product manager at Adobe, and he says they purposely abstain from adding certain features because they don't want to be the first ones
To enable
the masses to do harmful things. In fact, they would rather never be the ones to enable us to hurt each other. So, and it's part of capitalism, right? It's like your product is not going to sell well if it's getting a bunch of flack in the press, and then it's going to draw scrutiny and regulation. So you don't want to be too heavily regulated either as a private company, because that's bad news for you and your shareholders. So we have these mechanisms, right? This cat and mouse game, like you said. It's like the technology outpaces regulation, regulation catches up, and then we come up with new ways to sort of thwart those regulations and get around them. We've seen this since the Industrial Revolution, right? The Luddites, the followers of Ludd, they were mad about the conditions in the textile mills when the machines came in and started sort of displacing some of the work. There were like untrained apprentices. There were people with, not up to par training, going to work, people, really young folks. So they started putting rocks in the machines. They just started breaking the machines because they're angry. And at least once they like burned down the factory because the machines were causing these sort of hard conversations about like, well, just because there's machines doesn't mean you can stick untrained like youths into the mix and hope they do okay. So yes, Courtney, do you have a question?
You're unmuted, dear.
I'm unmuted. Thank you. How do we even broach the subject with people creating these programs for AI tech to keep society safe? About cameras and tech, like the truckers in Canada being restricted from purchasing with their debit cards. I mean, I fear that AI is further dividing society and that people who dissent will be punished and canceled, and that AI is a tool to help make that happen.
Say more. Go on.
There's just
the doomsday prediction by Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at all the censorship and information I get in alternative media sources. And I mean, media has been manipulative for decades and decades, but it's really exploded lately.
Yeah, it's true that like it's a double-edged sword. I like
double-edged sword.
Like I like it because I can use it for stuff. Like I identify plants in the park with my phone now.
Right.
I just point my camera and it's like, oh, that's a tree. I didn't know its name and when it flowers previously. And I like using, like in my browser, I like using the little Chat GPT like summary plugin because maybe I don't want to spend 8 minutes reading an article. I just want to spend 30 seconds reading the summary of that article, right? Mm-hmm. And then but then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like we have stopkillerrobots.org, right? Where it's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't set drones loose on the battlefield and like allow it to like point weapons at people. So there are two ends of the spectrum, and one is like colorizing old photos and animating pictures of my ancestors in the black and white photos. Like, oh, that's what my grandfather would have looked like if I could see like a video of him, And then on the other end, it's like we are creating a police state in Uyghur China where people are picking cotton and they're not allowed to leave their like home community, and they're using like Google Glass style glasses to like identify people and say like, oh, this person has like low social credit, arrest them. I'm laughing not to cry. So how do we have these conversations? It's like, let's just try to raise a mentally well society and, build people who want to do good things with technology and not abuse it for, power or money. Like I think that's the crux of it. And let's just, try to knock down the tools that come up to help people do bad things.
Yeah. I think building awareness is the key, and that's what you're doing with this book and with this podcast is bringing to light things that people may be unaware are happening behind the scenes and some of the specifics around it.
I would suggest it's also saying we all need to stay alert and stay involved. As society moved forward in years past, when cars came into being, we had to eventually, people had to demand, and governments had to provide regulations on the road that govern the way we drive: stoplights, stop signs, lanes to pass and not pass. Without that, we would have had a continual, just crazy, free-for-all chaos out there. Well, I think it's going to require groups of us in individual areas that are affected by this to pull together. A current example is the fact that right now, we're probably all aware that there are a number of strikes going on across our nation.
Hey, Brian.
The Teamsters just formed a deal with UPS, United Parcel Service. Right now, the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild, Screen Actors Guild, are on strike against the studios, because one of the things that as a group we all realized we've got to take a stand on, or we're going to be taken to the cleaners. And since my background as a writer, director, producer, and sometime actor has been, I have watched how this has functioned over 40 years. And we know that the studios have a desire to create widgets that they can make a lot of money on. And by widgets, I mean something that can be easily replicated. In this case, they would like it to be movies, television series, whatever. But they know that the original product is a concept, an idea, a story idea. It's very hard to just keep regulating that. But they have seen over the years that television series can be made to fall into somewhat of a formulaic pattern. And if that's the case, they are feeling, hey, if we can feed a number of, just pick the name of a series, of such and such a series that unfolds week to week to week or episode to episode with a similar format, if we can feed those scripts into an AI-generated computer system, it will start spitting out episodes that will be close enough that we can continue to make a lot of money off of that. And most of the audience will not be able to tell the difference. Sure, there'll be some that say, hey, it's not as sharp as it used to be, so I'm going to watch something else. But enough will be watching to generate the kind of profits the studios want. And they will say, okay, we don't have to deal with those pesky writers anymore, or we don't have to deal with those pesky actors. This is why the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild know this is a do or die moment in the entertainment business, just in that one regard. So I'm extrapolating that thought and saying all of us citizens of the world
in our own little silos,
need to make sure we are banded together and say, hey, we need strong, intelligent regulation to protect all of us in whatever that silo is.
Helmut, you had a question earlier.
Well, I had a technical question. If you have looked into self-driving technology for cars, my own experience is I'm driving self-driving almost now for 2 years, mostly the time, 90%. And I would say it works to 95% perfect, about 5% going wrong.
Feels dangerous.
And Tesla has decided lately to move the whole self-driving input for the car visual. It's all based on cameras.
Yes, and he opens his book with about the self-driving car.
Okay.
So definitely, Rob, comment on CV and self-driving vehicles. Oh, was that your question?
Yeah, this was basically the question. I want to see not so much the society questioning of bad actors here as like bad working technology.
Practical.
And which can bring us in danger as a driver or as another human in traffic, but can be run over by a car.
Okay, Rob, so chime in on the self-driving vehicles and the fact that Tesla's decision to move to CV.
Yeah, so it's always been CV with autonomous vehicles, right? Even if it's not optical cameras. So you have LiDAR. You could say that's a form of vision, right? Like mapping the environment around the car. I think Tesla is moving to purely visible spectrum cameras, primarily from like a manufacturing standpoint. Like it's cheaper to go without a LiDAR sensor. And they're hoping they can solve self-driving with just those visible light cameras. And that's wild to me. I think LiDAR does better. And, you know, once we have more manufacturers with like working LiDAR autonomous vehicles, then we'll build more LiDAR, you know, factories, right? Like, and it'll get cheaper. But so I'm an idealist. When I wrote the book, I thought like self-driving is going to be great because humans make a lot of really arbitrary decisions based on our emotions. You know, we get broken up with, and we're driving like as if we're drunk. You know, when we're tired, we drive very poorly. We drive very poorly, just like as a people. And computers are not going to drive poorly. Like they're going to do a lot less arbitrary stuff and just abide by systems and be sort of more rational in that sense. But that only works if like all the cars are self-driving and there are almost no human pilots on the road, which just isn't going to happen overnight, right? Like it's almost going to be easier to just build out more public transit infrastructure and do away with the cars. That's kind of the way I've been leaning lately, because it's different, right? It's a totally different domain when between like, you know, recognizing a tumor as malignant or benign, like that can happen, you know, over days or weeks if necessary. The car has to decide in an instant whether to slam on the brakes or whether to swerve or what, or maybe that's just a mirage on the road. So it's just like a very critical, very time-sensitive application, and it's going to take a long time.
What's that, Bob?
Courtney's been asking a question for a long time.
Yes, Courtney, please.
I think that AI generated content, whether it's TV shows or articles, like I would never use AI to engage with people on social media by sharing how to cook as preventative medicine, because I want my content to be flesh and blood. And to respond to people, you know, I would never use AI for my business, basically, because my business is my content. So an aspect of it, an important aspect of it is my content. So I think AI is like, because enough people will watch the AI generated shows that it's contributing to the further dumbing down of our society. And we already see such short attention spans and people just wanting to escape and not think for themselves much. I'm done.
Yeah, no, I think touching back on the kind of film industry and the SAG-AFTRA and the writers' strikes, you know, I haven't seen a feature-length screenplay written by AI that I enjoyed. You know, like I don't think
that you know of.
That. Yeah, like if someone's sitting on an AI-generated feature-length screenplay and it's good, that's news to me. I think it's going to be a while before, you know, like the studios really put their money behind like AI-generated screen content. I'm skeptical, but there are narrow applications where it has helped already. Like I read about Hollywood test screenings, where people go and they're paid to watch movies so that before they're released, right? Like during the editing process, like maybe Mr. Froelich, you've participated in such like screenings. I don't know. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but the idea is now there are infrared cameras behind the movie screen watching the audience's faces as they react to certain scenes in the movie. You know, like, oh, did this scene get a lot of laughs? Did people like, were they scared? Were they jumping in their seats? And it kind of is the best of both worlds in the sense of like, you know, it used to be like sweat conductivity sensors. So your audience members were all like wired up and they were kind of conscious of that, which was distracting. Or they had to fill out questionnaires like after the movie and by then they had already forgotten half the plot, and they had reflected for a while, and so it wasn't really like what they were feeling in the moment. So this is one like very narrow application where like the cameras behind the movie screens in the test theaters, people are opting into this, they're getting paid for it. And then the studios are collecting all this data. They could do like 100 screenings at once around the country and have 100 people in each theater, and boom, that's like so many data points.
We go invest $50 million in it. Yeah.
Well, and that's a very interesting point that you brought out in the book and that you're bringing out now, because there is some relevance and some help to, from the standpoint of you notice the audience reaction, for instance, in a particular scene, and that may generate a sense of, oh, maybe this edit right here at this moment didn't get the reaction that we wanted because of the data that we now have back. So let's change that edit. But here's where a deeper challenge with that kind of CV and AI sense goes. We know as writers and directors that sometimes that edit didn't work at that point because the edit either needed to be shorter or longer, or the image needed to be juxtaposed with something else, or, and this is where I think that the deeper understanding of the computer, and I don't know how they get to this, you realize as a storyteller that edit didn't work in scene 57 the way you wanted it to, because the setup wasn't strong enough in scene 36. And once you go back and fix scene 36, and then you screen that for an audience, and you don't change the edit in scene 57, they react exactly the way you wanted them to react because they were properly set up before. Now, how CV or AI gets to know that, that's where I wonder, is that something where human beings will always have an advantage? That's a big question to me, because in that case, we are dealing, especially with movies and television, you are primarily dealing with emotions. Motion pictures are an emotional impact medium. They are not designed to just bring an intellectual message. They can accomplish that, but they are designed with music, with visuals, with dialogue, with interaction of characters to be emotional. How does CV and AI create that on the same level as human beings? I don't know, but that's fascinating to explore.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that like these tools are sort of useless without our intuition as humans, with lived experiences and, that sort of craftsmanship or craftspersonship. Certainly. Yeah. And some filmmakers have complained that tools like these are used to sort of dull the edges of what should be kind of like edgy material. Like, oh no, I wanted the audience to be uncomfortable in that moment, because this is like a challenging piece of art. It's not just like supposed to make people feel good all the time. And then the studio bludgeons them with like, but the data says otherwise. So, we're going to change it. And, we control the purse strings. So sorry. So it goes both ways. It's that double-edged sword. It's like, it has the potential for utility and for, maximization and making our lives easier, making conveniences, giving new people a voice, and also for silencing voices and for amplifying, biases, amplifying our human biases.
Well, and Rob, what I was led to think about was, we can't see something if we can't define it in our heads, right? And there's this thing about the Mandela effect where we all saw something that wasn't there, like the Bernstein Bears, the Stouffer stuffing. There's all of these examples in history that people just didn't see what they see. And like the word Febreze is spelled with one E. A lot of people just assume like our brains input things that aren't there, but at the same time, it's the idea that you don't see something until it's maybe been in front of you 7 times. There's like a lot of studies behind that. What I see with AI and CV potentially is that it's pulling from a much bigger brain than we have individually. So it has a much bigger inventory of classifications of what it can see. And it's like when you go back and look at a picture that was taken and you see something that you didn't see when you took the picture. It's kind of like the photobomb that somebody does. But I'm just curious if the positive side of CV is that it will allow us to look at things, to see things that we can't see with our human brain that the AI brain can then see and dive deeper into because it can think so much faster. Was there anything that you found around that topic? I mean, I guess that's the case in medicine, right? It's able to determine things that maybe a human doctor may not see and be biased towards.
Certainly, yeah. It's computer vision enables us to spot hidden patterns sometimes. This is kind of counter-setical to the AI snake oil stuff I mentioned. Like, you can't extract meaning that isn't there. But you can extract meaning if it's there and it's sort of like noisy and it's hard for us as humans to see. Like, we have a really easy time identifying faces. Like, we see faces in everything we see. There's a word for this, I forget what it is. But, you know, we've developed like a heart blood flow analyzer that can just take a sort of X-ray image of the chest and tell you in like 20 seconds whether or not you have this very special condition, this heart condition. That used to take like hours, like several hours sitting in a chair with the technician there having to operate it manually. So like, if we can speed certain elements of clinical life up by like 200x, like I'm for that. And it's more accurate than, you know, what a nurse sitting there doing it. Like, that nurse can be out administering medicine. That's great. Like, we can have a computer vision system monitoring someone on a ventilator. Like, that's a very passive thing. It's just like, are they struggling and pulling out their breathing tube, or are they doing what they're supposed to, just like hanging out, letting the machine do its thing? Like, a nurse doesn't need to be sitting there just watching the whole time. You know, if we can use computer vision to like sound the alarm when there's a child drowning in your pool, that's better than nothing, right? Like, that's better than no lifeguard by a long shot. You know, like, so there are these arenas where, like, certainly what was the question again?
It wasn't, it was more just a, like, zooming way out, more of a philosophical view that I do believe in the things I've read and heard, and that we don't see things as they are. Often we see things as we want to see them. And I think that AI has the ability to filter, to fix that, because it's, you know, you can't tell, if you tell a lie enough times, people start to believe it, right? AI, I think, should be used to fact check every president, every statement, like, to a certain extent, people are not held to fact checking like AI has ability to do. So I think even with just, it does clear. And what someone mentioned earlier was, you know, the line Bob was mentioning earlier, where you have a lineup of potential criminals, AI will then help prevent people from being falsely accused, because there's definite evidence that so-and-so, we can think about all the falsely accused people, and people are talking so much about bias and things like that. But you have to understand too, it's also there to protect people from exactly that kind of accusations that aren't true. Yes, Bob.
I'm curious how everybody feels if the insurance company gets the report of that ailment and denies your insurance, as opposed to the doctor getting it and noticing that you're sick. Now you've got a real problem on your hands.
Yeah, so my partner works in genetics, and she is, you know, concerned with people's privacy. Like, she has to discourage people from getting a lot of tests done, because the more tests you have done, the more information is out there about your predispositions, and that actually is not protected under any law. Like, life insurance companies are free to use that data against you or for you, or however they want. We have HIPAA, right, which protects us in terms of health insurance. Your genetic information can't be used to discriminate against you for like health insurance premiums, but life insurance is still not really under that same umbrella of protection. And we don't want that kind of thing to happen with computer vision, right? We want our data protected such that it can't be used against us in things like, credit bureaus, you know, health insurance, all that stuff. That stuff that's tied to your identity.
So what we're doing is depending, now we're no longer depending on Apple, we're now depending on an insurance company to be ethical and not be driven by dollars.
Well, but we can make certain data off limits to them, right?
Sure.
Like how certain evidence can't be used in court.
Right, but as was noted here before, we have rules against running red lights, but I can tell you my experience as a driver is I always wait for the intersection to clear. Not everyone stops for red lights.
Right, and automated license plate readers can help, increase. Like as a bicyclist in Brooklyn, like I don't have a car. I get around everywhere on my bike, and I ride in the street with the garbage trucks and the pickup trucks and the big things that can kill me. And so I like it when I'm told, like, yeah, there's been a reduction in red light violations because we installed a camera here that automatically tickets people when they run the light. And in fact, it's stricter than most, cops we've posted there on a motorcycle. Like it'll get you even if you're just like an inch past the line. Now people are driving more cautiously in the places where I like to navigate my daily life.
Okay.
Well, no, and I do think that the CV can help save lives out on the road in a big way. Just happened here on the corner. A garbage truck ran over a bicyclist and killed him. And apparently all the alerts were going off in the vehicle, but the driver still turned to let him know that there was a biker there. But if the vehicle was prevented and physically stopped because the human was such an idiot that he couldn't hit the brakes, at that point, I'm all for, CV and automobile safety, because as a biker too, Rob, I mean, that a car that's turning right is the most dangerous place to be. If you're a biker on the right side of a vehicle, they can't see you, and you don't, they cut that corner sharper than you think they do. But I just started driving a car that has the lane protection thing where the steering wheel actually will start to turn its way back onto the lane, which is great because as a biker, we're in the bike lane. And it's really sad when you hear a biker get run over when they were in the bike lane and the person was a distracted driver. And that's usually what's happening. Really quick, I just want to go around the room. You guys are all so gracious to be here. Ian, did you have any questions that we didn't address that you wanted to ask?
Nothing that I can recall. They float by really so quickly.
All right. Thank you for being here, Dina. Helmet. And Robert, anything?
I have a comment. I guess.
Okay, Robert's got a comment.
Just in general, earlier we were talking about problems. Excuse me, problems with artificial intelligence, and that they're that it causes potential problems in a whole lot of different areas. And then I was kind of listening, and it seemed like we talked about the good things, but the good things, for the most part, they weren't necessarily trivial, but they were much smaller and important than what the big things were. The big things are like, drones dropping bombs in other countries or things like that, or robots, that are just walking around shooting everybody. I don't know if we talked about that, but I just wanted to mention that my view anyway is that the potential for artificial intelligence is enormous, and it's enormous, sure, in the bad parts, but in the good parts. And we have some huge problems right now. For example, the climate problems, where our world is deteriorating rapidly underneath us, and we're not really able to do a lot because, for one thing, everybody argues about what to do and so forth. I think that's one area where an example of somewhere where AI could actually make a big difference. And in fact, it may be our only hope because the AI can do things like, well, just as an example, you could have an AI and CV system that is able to recognize pieces of plastic in the ocean, right? So you send this drone out there and it cleans up the ocean, I mean, it scales up. It's not people doing it. And what I'm saying is that you could come up with solutions to the big problems with AI. And I think that makes it worth all of the effort that we have to put in to protect ourselves from the bad guys and from the mistakes and from the immaturity of AI, basically. So I just wanted to comment.
Good comment. Yeah, I agree with you. We don't want to focus on the fear. We want to focus on the reality that it could do a great deal to save us from ourselves.
The fear is important too, though.
John,
let's not forget that if we build a robot, to go collect the plastic in the ocean, it's like if we're not careful, it'll clean up all the octopi too, right? Like, let's just be careful as we go.
Right, John.
Yeah, I think there's two branches. One of them is AI being used on technical things such as reading sea CT data for helping doctors make a diagnosis. And that's more of a physical attribute of AI that I think is welcomed and needed in society. On the other hand, there's all this other nefarious potential where you're going to have somebody's voice being presented so you can send me money so I can save something, you know. And that is a more difficult question to answer. How do you regulate that? The physical aspect of it is going to be regulated, self-regulating by whether it's efficient and efficacious and all of those things. And if it's not, then the people that are using that are going to dump it or change. On the social side of things, we're going to have a debate about what truth is. And that's difficult to ascertain. And that truth, if it can be shaped with AI nefariously or in a good way, then yeah, I don't know how you get there.
You don't believe what you see on the internet. That's what I will tell you right now. Bill, any last words?
I very much like what Robert was saying about the good part of AI and focusing on that, because I think one of the potential good aspects of AI and CV is that the requirements to have intelligent regulations will require us to be more humane in our humanity. I think to come together as people in finding the good that you were talking about that should be, and I think hopefully can be, predominant. I think that's a positive aspect of CV as it develops. It forces us to engage with our humanity if we're going to go forward positively.
Yeah, it's a new tool in our arsenal, and we can use it for good or bad, but it's good to be aware of all these. Well, Rob, we went over the hour. I appreciate you making time for us. I do recommend people check out this book. It's only still $1 on Kindle if people want to get it electronically. That's a nice move for the environment. Otherwise, it's available in paperback. And any final words you want to share as the author?
Don't forget to touch grass, kids. You know, we get out there and experience the world. Don't get too hung up on AI. You know,
what's next? So you said you have this potential job. Is there anything else you're working on?
I was working on a film slate detector, actually, because I used to work in dailies, which is where you kind of pre-process a lot of the footage for the editor of a film. You know, that's an exciting thing for me. Is like building a computer vision object detector to automate my old job. But other resources people might be interested in, deep fakes and the approaching info apocalypse. That's another title out there that is kind of in the same vein. If you're curious how deep fakes might shape society and how we can prevent that, that's another read worth looking into.
I will make a note of that. Info apocalypse.
Deep fakes and the coming infocalypse.
Oh, infocalypse. Gee,
yes.
Created a new word.
Yeah. Look at the journalist Kashmir Hill and her work. She's up to date on what's happening in the computer vision and society feed. And lastly, look at what the ACLU is doing in Massachusetts. They're doing some very interesting stuff, helping craft common sense regulations around computer vision and society.
Well, I appreciate you bringing all of this to our attention. Bob, any final words as the president of SoftTech?
No, none for me. Asked if it went along.
All right, you guys, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Rob. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Till next time. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Tech Reads, sponsored by SoftTech. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share it with your colleagues. If you have comments, questions, or want to suggest an author for a future episode, visit SoftTech at softec.org and click on the Tech Reads link.